everyone, it's Joe Waxman, and I am here with Alice Fava. And I've known Alice for a long time, going way back to the summer conferences. And Alice is in Toronto, where she does a lot of macrobiotic activity and has her own center there. So Alice, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. Thanks for having me. This is great. I love what you're doing.
Thanks. It's been great, and I've got a really positive response from it. So I'm happy to have you and everyone else here.
Well, it's really great to see what people that I don't know who have been macrobiotic as long as me doing all these great things everywhere. So it's really great.
Exactly, and that's my intention, to really share, macrobiotics with macrobiotic followers. Kind of unite the community.
Yeah.
Anyway, Alice, I'd love to hear about your story. How did it all start for you, and what got you interested in macrobiotics?
Well, I started macrobiotics. I heard the word macrobiotics. I think it was 1980-ish. And I was at a meditation group, and after the meditation, somebody was talking to somebody else, and I overheard her say macrobiotics, and then something about eating locally grown food. That's all I heard. So I dashed over there, because for many years I'd had these things swirling in my head about like some of the principles of macrobiotics, but like, why are we eating food that comes from far away? Like, I don't know. I had all these. And when I heard the eating locally grown food, I went over and I said, what are you talking about? She goes, oh, macrobiotics. I said, well, what is it? And she goes, I'm not going to explain it to you. She goes, there's a bookstore downtown, go to this bookstore, and there's all kinds of books on macrobiotics. So the next morning, I had small children at the time. I grabbed my kids, got in the car, went driving downtown to this bookstore, and I bought all these macrobiotic books, Micho's, the book of macrobiotics, books by George Osawa, and I started reading them, and it was almost like I was remembering. It was the weirdest feeling. It was like, oh my God, everything makes sense. I don't have to invent this. It's already invented for me, right? And then, so I started with the philosophy, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I started cooking. I was making, do you remember Herman Ihara's little book? I think it was Zen Macrobiotic Cooking, and it would have like 3 ingredients, like rice, salt, water. So anyway, I couldn't eat anything that I made. I would make it, throw it out. But I also simultaneously became very militant about it. So I threw out everything. It was just ridiculous. Anyway, eventually I met other macrobiotic people who were doing cooking classes, and I tasted proper macrobiotic food, and I learned how to cook, and everything calmed down a little bit. And I remember going to cooking classes in the beginning. They were way outside the city, and I would drive from downtown, pick up my sister-in-law who also had small children. We'd leave the children with our husbands, and then drive all the way north of the city. I think we would pick up my mother too, who lived north of the city. So there'd be this convoy every Wednesday night for cooking classes. And then I started teaching. Then I eventually made my way down to the summer conferences and met Micho and all the other teachers. And then I brought the Kushi Institute Extension Program to Toronto. Anyway, a lot of stuff happened between then and now. So that's sort of my background. So my early years of macrobiotics, I didn't study with Micho. I didn't do that until much later. So missed out on that, but yeah. Then I got my levels, and then I opened the Macrobiotic Center of Toronto about 7 years ago, and it had a physical location. And then I closed it down 2 years ago, I think. So now it's basically out of my house. I do cooking classes online and consultations and so on.
So right now, is it mostly you doing
It's just me now.
Yeah,
it's just me now. My sidekick, Omar, went on a trip to India, and he's from Lebanon, so he went to visit his family and then has been stuck there since COVID. So it's basically me now on Zoom, which is fine,
Before then, you did have people come and visit your center and teach there, right?
Oh yeah. I had brought people in. Yeah, I was doing that before I actually had a center. So your dad came, Micho came, Ed Esco, everybody, Charles Millman, all the teachers came. I brought them here. And then more recently with my center, Yeah, I had, I had a number of teachers coming through and teaching. But times have changed. Like 20 years ago, if you brought a teacher in, like everybody, I don't know, it would be no problem filling up a room with 30, 40, 50 people. And I mistakenly thought that would happen again when I opened my center, but no, it's not what happened. It was really hard to get the numbers and the interest this time.
So that was in Toronto?
Yeah, yeah.
So back then there was a high interest in macrobiotics in Toronto, but not so much anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe it's just diluted and it's everybody's practicing some aspect of it, because I see brown rice in grocery stores and it seems to sell out all the time. So some people must have incorporated aspects of it. But like what I saw, it was yoga, like yoga studios everywhere, yogis becoming vegan. Like, I did a lot of consultations for yoga students. Like that's the happening place now. So
people went into yoga. What do you think happened with macrobiotics? Why do you think people stopped being, well, not everyone's not interested, but I guess there was a drop in people coming. Why do you think?
I'm not sure. I think, just speaking from my experience in Toronto, I think there was just so much more available. Like 30 years ago, there was just macrobiotics. I don't know. But now there's so much available. There's vegan. Vegan is much more, well, sexy. Like vegan food is much more fun, and it's much, and so that's appealing, right? I mean, it has its backside. We know that. But yeah, I think why would the macrobiotics seems kind of stodgy. Like, so I get a lot of older, not everybody's older. I guess I have some young students, but people with illnesses, diabetes, cancer, MS. That's who gravitates now. But,
So do you think that macrobiotics has an image problem among a lot of people? Like just the wrong image, the wrong message, the wrong idea about when people hear the word macrobiotics, maybe they think something very austere and limited and
maybe. And I've had people come to my classes and, like, for example, Omar, who he's young, he's your age. He studied with somebody in Lebanon, not studied, but there's somebody with a television show in Lebanon, an older woman who studied with Micho. And then so he was kind of practicing on his own. Then he came to cooking classes. That's how I met him. And after the third class, he said, but this isn't macrobiotic. Like you're not teaching macrobiotics. I'm like, oh, why do you think that? And he goes, well, like your food. And I go, well, there hasn't been any oil. There hasn't been any, any sugar. There hasn't, and he had to think about it because what he was used to much more austere, I don't know, umeboshi plums and brown rice. I don't know what he was used to, but he was surprised that this was macrobiotic. So I think that's kind of, I don't know, people must have this conception of brown rice and soy sauce, from back in the day.
Right, like a samurai diet or something.
Yeah, and then they didn't study. And I still have, I have people that come to me that have been macrobiotic so-called for a long time, and then they can't do the diet anymore, and then they start eating eggs and chicken, and they get mad, they get angry at macrobiotics. I don't understand it because I always evolved. I mean, so yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the solution to that is, right? I mean, people suggested that I not call my center macrobiotic, but I'm like, well, why not? Like, that's what I'm teaching. Like, someone has to teach macrobiotics. Someone has to teach the philosophy. You can become vegan and just not eat meat, but I think it's important to have the philosophy out there and the principles that make you free, right? It's not even about food, but we're stuck on food because everybody's so sick. Stuck on food, right?
I mean, the way I put it is that it doesn't end at food, but it does start with food because we have to make choices 3 times a day. We have 3 meals a day, and we're bringing consciousness to an area that lacks consciousness. And that's one of the uniquenesses of macrobiotics. It doesn't end with food, it starts with food because, that we all have to have these choices. And unless you just want to be willfully ignorant, just say, I don't want to pay attention to what I eat,
Yeah.
Well, that's an ignorant stance as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned. I
Yes.
mean,
Yeah. You don't
so
pull any
you,
punches, Joe.
oh,
I
well,
agree. I agree. I
I mean,
agree. And
go ahead.
go ahead.
No, I mean, I'm concerned about the well-being and welfare of macrobiotics, and I think there is an issue with the image. So we do have to take care of that. We do have to point out the things that are problematic and issues that need working on. So
There's also the judgment aspect that was under an undercurrent, you know. I don't know if you experienced that, like, but people very pretending to practice well, whatever that is, and then this binging business. There's always like that, like this kind of oh, that person eats badly, and I don't know, just that's there as well. So you're feeling like you're being judged all the time, or were. I'm not sure that that's the case anymore, but there was that, and so that is off-putting. And then you, especially if people want to do things perfectly, and there's no perfection, right? There's no perfection. And what people think of is, I'm eating really well today. And I go, what did you eat today? Well, I had miso soup, and I had brown rice, and I had steamed kale. And I go, well, you shouldn't be eating those. That's not good for you. That may be some standard diet somewhere, but you should be eating a salad and noodles, right? So
right.
it's sort of that, there's also a conceptual, judgmental, beat yourself up aspect to it, which has to do with your condition. But
Yeah,
I don't know.
and that has to do with somebody's progression as far as their relationship with their own dogma, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can see that same thing manifest in religions. Like, people are very dogmatic about their religious ideas or whatever idea. It's fundamentalism, basically, and you're carrying fundamentalism into your diet, into your macrobiotics.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of funny, but I say don't bring your mental illness into your diet. Of course, you can't help it. It's not like people are trying. People are like,
No, I know. It's really funny. Yeah. And all practices, what I've learned is all practices are meant to fail. You have to start somewhere. You have to start, okay, this is the standard macrobiotic diet, and this is the formula, and you do that, but then it has to fail. And it has to break apart, and you have to go beyond the practice, right? And it happens, not like you said, in religion, and it happens in yoga. For example, I was doing Ashtanga yoga, loved it. Oh my God, it changed my life. It really helped my macrobiotic practice and everything. But I did too much of it. So I started getting a pain in my hip. And then I was, I was getting up at 5 o'clock and doing this rigorous practice, and it was fantastic. And they're like, the teacher's like, oh yeah, keep practicing. I'm like, okay. So anyways, I wrecked my hip. I couldn't walk up the stairs without holding the handrail. So to make a long story short, I had to go, okay, I think I have to do nothing. And I did. I stopped practicing yoga completely. I did. Anyways, it took 2 years. My leg got rested, the pain is gone, et cetera, et cetera. But that's kind of, how could I put it? I'm not blaming the practice. Maybe the practice brought this to the surface, but I had to deal with the practice my own way. I can't, the 42-year-old teacher giving me advice, is maybe not relevant to my situation, right? So anyway, there's other examples of that. And even macrobiotics, I remember about 12 years ago, I was at a summer conference, and somebody owed me money. And then, so they said, oh, instead of giving you back this money, why don't you do you want to do there's a spot in the group consultation with Micho. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'll do that. So I go into the group consultation, and I had been feeling kind of off. I was feeling like heavy, and I wasn't feeling right. And so I was the last person. So everybody in the class, like, they all seemed to have like serious health conditions, and he was kind of reprimanding people, and don't eat that, don't eat so much fruit, this and that. I'm like, oh my God, what's he going to say when he gets to me? And prior to this, I've been trying to eat better. I was trying to make my proportions of gamasio higher, more salt, less sesame seeds. So so it's my turn, and he goes, what's wrong with you? And I go, I don't know, I just kind of feel fat. I don't feel right. And he goes, well, you've been macrobiotic a long time. I go, yeah. He goes, yeah, so you should watch the salt and baked flour, but you should eat fruit juice, wine, tempura, salad, raw. Like, he just went through the whole list of the things that I was already craving, but thinking in my mind that they were bad, and I had to be, in my mind, stricter, right? That was mind-blowing to me. It was showed me how you need support. You need to speak to people who are going to tell you honestly what you need. And you can't, it's hard to practice on your own because you use your own skew or judgment to make decisions for yourself, right? So at some point you need somebody with a higher consciousness than you to point things out. That consultation, it blew my mind because I thought he was going to tell me to eat, put 3 teaspoons in your miso soup as opposed to, anyway, so. Yeah, so it's always, I don't know. But you have to study a lot you just have to study a lot, and maybe people aren't prepared. Maybe it's too complicated. I don't know.
And by study, I mean, do you mean like in books or more like lived experience, like really?
I mean, like, yeah, you can read a book, of course, studying, like talking to other people, like listening to other people. Like there's all this free stuff on YouTube, like these great teachers, like, your dad, Ed Esco, and then I see how many views they have. And it's like, I don't know, 10 views or whatever, some small amount of views. Like there's so much out there. I mean, you don't have to go become a scholar, but you have to study. You have to like pay attention to what you're eating. You have to pay attention to how you feel and be around like-minded people that can be supportive, right?
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. I don't think we've ever or will ever reach a point where we're like, we got it. We nailed it. We figured out the diet. We figured out what everyone needs to eat. And we just need to tell people because it's a constant, it's alive, it's growing, it's a process, and it's always changing. And not everyone has all the answers, or no one has all the answers.
Yeah.
We can always learn and grow. So
have you ever watched the show Chris Beat Cancer? He's got a YouTube video. It's this young man about your age who recovered from cancer and then he changed his diet and then went on to help other people, et cetera, et cetera. So he has this YouTube channel, Chris Beat Cancer, and he interviews people who beat cancer. So he had a couple of macrobiotic people on there who, changed their diet and recovered from breast cancer, et cetera. But then he has all these other people who had pancreatic stage 4, 15 years ago. And then they went on a raw food diet. Oh, and they're still alive and they have a little community. They help people and tell them what they did. Somebody else didn't go raw, but went juice. Like, so there was so many, and some people even eat animal food, just change the quality of their eating and recover from all these like stage 4 serious cancer. So I was watching this because I was fascinated, and I realized that, you can cure illness. You don't need macrobiotics to cure disease. There's enough out there. Like there's all these wonderful people like Dr. Neil Barnard and Colin Campbell and McDougall, et cetera, who are helping people become healthier. So then I think, well, what have we got to offer that's different? What does it come down to? Because you eat brown rice and you recover from your diabetes, but you can do that in using so many other protocols, right? Eliminate animal food basically and dairy food. So I often question, like, what unique thing do we have to offer? I'm not as good. I don't have a platform like Dr. Neil Barnard and and all the resources that he has, or any of those other people. They're doing fantastic work, and they're almost mainstream, right? So I refer a lot of people that I feel might find macrobiotics weird to go see go listen to Dr. Esselstyn. You've got a heart condition, go over there, he'll beat you up and tell you not to eat oil and you'll recover. So I have these questions, right? Sometimes I wonder, what am I doing? Because it's a lot of work to do cooking classes, right? It's hard work.
It is hard work. I mean, I tend to think, we don't have to invalidate other ways in order for macrobiotics to be valid. There can be more than one valid way, valid expression. I think the uniqueness of macrobiotics is the real the energetic understanding from the Orient, the Asian dialectic yin yang 5 transformations that can really penetrate the essence of food So we have philosophy that sort of comes first. And the difference between, medical doctors and what we have is that they base their understanding on evidence. They'll do
Yeah.
experiments and do peer-reviewed, double-blind, placebo studies, and that's great. That's wonderful. But that's after the fact. We come before that. We come and say, well, based on energetic principles, this is how we know this and that, and they often line up.
Yeah.
But it's a different approach, and it's still, it's perfectly, it's necessary, and we need to have it, and we need to have this this unique understanding of philosophy that pre-exists the evidence, the circumstantial evidence. So, that to me is the uniqueness of macrobiotics.
They're still catching up with macrobiotic principles. Like every day, there's a new scientific confirmation or corroboration of things that we've been talking about, right? So it's kind of like, so over the years, I've seen that over and over and over again. So, I think macrobiotics is principles and are superior. Like it's really the medicine of the future, right? And, and the other thing that is disappointing to me is that it's really hard to teach people anymore. Like, I can teach, from my own platform, but I've tried to go into the Autistic Society, to go to the prostate groups, all those organizations, and no one's interested. Like, I'll do free classes. I'll teach parents how to feed their children. And I know from past experience that out of there's a certain percentage, if I have 30 people in the class, there's a certain percentage who will be very serious about it. And then a further lesser percentage of people that will carry it further and actually be cured. I already know that. Those are my algorithms, because I've done this enough. But you can't get in there. You can't find a kitchen in a church basement anymore. You can't teach in a high school. Do you know what I mean? It's very difficult. I think I heard you talking about it on Facebook. These regulations, make it so difficult. So that's why I did my center. But I'm not the government. I can't subsidize my center. Whereas if you can go into a school that already has a fully furnished kitchen, or a community center, or a church, which is where we used to do a lot of our teaching, right? And then people from the community find you, like regular people, not people that already know about macrobiotics. So that's another change in society. And if I was prone to conspiracy theories, which sometimes I am, I would wonder about that, It's very hard to find a kitchen.
Well, one of the ways I like to hold my perspective about macrobiotics is that when it was introduced, if macrobiotics is this big, long thing, if we're talking about, history, and macrobiotics has maybe, who knows, thousands of years potential.
Yeah.
The initial surge in popularity was sort of like the quick growth that we see in a seed when it sprouts and pops out. There could be this initial surge that eventually slows down, broadens, deepens. And we might be experiencing some of that, where we're past the initial growth phase and we're in a deepening, broadening kind of long-lasting trajectory, where we just need to keep plugging away, and it's a long-term strategy. So I think we can, we don't have to get bogged down by the past success and
You're right. You're absolutely right.
I think we're still doing great things. We, meaning the macrobiotic community at large.
Oh no, for sure. Yeah.
Wonderful things, and we still have tons of room to grow. And it's just a long-term game that we're.
Yeah. Oh, I see people are doing fantastic stuff in Europe. Like, I saw your interview with Maria and Zhao, and they're actually opened a center, and there's Oliver Calmedo has a center in England as well. That's very encouraging, because I, for one, really missed the Kushi Institute. But, that was, I don't have to get into that, but it was a wonderful place. You can send your students there. They come back all refreshed and motivated and well-fed and inspired, and it's just hard to create that on an individual basis, right? And then that's the other thing, that there isn't a collective so much anymore, right? There isn't a collective like a collection. I guess there are, but we're all so far away, right? Like, you know, I'm in Toronto, then there's people in Boston, people in Pennsylvania, like do you know what I mean? We're scattered, I guess, across the planet. So that's why what you're doing is so fantastic.
Well, yeah, I mean, the old is destined to fade away, and the
That's
new
right.
is constantly being created, and it's never been done before, and we have to be creative. That's the
Yeah.
whole essence of creating, is you're doing things new, and it's never been done before. So, yeah, that's what we're doing here. We have Zoom. We're uniting the macrobiotic community in what ways we can.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I've been doing my, Zoom classes on Zoom, cooking classes on Zoom now, and I'm actually finding that it's better than in person, because when you have class in person, the teacher does the cooking and people all watch, and then they eat the food and they all love the food, and then they go home and then they come back the next week, right? And I often wonder, what have they done in between? So the way I do my Zoom classes now is that I send out the menus ahead of time and the recipes, and people get the ingredients and we cook together. And so it's really, they're all in their own kitchen with their own stuff and with their own
yeah.
equipment. And it's really, I think, this is way better, because people are actually making food, we eat together, and then they have leftovers for the next day. We talk about how to use, you know, and so it's, wow, I thought this is actually an improvement. Okay, the downside is they don't get to taste food, that, you know, they don't know whether the miso soup should taste like this or not, but still, that's a real, that was a surprise to me, that, you know, a real advantage.
Yeah, there are positives. There are benefits to things that we're experiencing now. Zoom is new, and it's been a huge benefit with the whole pandemic thing, COVID-19
Yeah.
and all that.
Yeah. How is the pandemic going down there?
I mean, it depends on what level you're talking about. I mean, the draconian tyranny is up. As far as I know, the disease is down at the like it's not existent as far as I'm concerned. It's just people like that. We have this political tyranny going on, but that's you know, who knows? That's a whole nother subject.
Well, no, but it's actually been an interesting time, for me, having to become more introspective, and I don't think I've ever eaten my own cooking for this long ever. Like, it's been 6 months. The last time I ate out was March the 8th. It was my daughter's birthday, and we went out for a pizza, and that was the last time. And I don't think I've had anybody else's cooking really since then. So
I know. I haven't been out to dinner in ages.
Yeah, well, there's no dinner to go out to anymore unless you want to go to a drive-through here. Our restaurants aren't. I think they're just opening this weekend.
There's some outdoor seating. We can get outdoor seating. I've been out to coffee with my father. We went out. We sat outside. So.
Yeah, but limited. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. And I have a daughter like this. The border is closed. I have a daughter who lives in Brooklyn, and I'm down there a lot in Brooklyn, and I haven't gone for 6 months, and I miss it. Miss the traveling, but that's okay. I'm missing out on going to Europe this summer, which is always something I look forward to. But okay, we'll just stay home. Yeah. So, did your father ever tell you the story about when we went to the prison? I had a prison project. He never told you.
No, it sounds like a great story. Why don't you tell it?
So I decided, like, this was like 20 years ago, that I was in a health food store, and I overheard somebody saying she was buying food because she was going up to a prison to give a lecture on something. And I'm like, oh, how do you do that? So she goes, oh yeah, just call the prison, and if you want to give a lecture, they're really good about volunteers. I'm like, oh, I'm going to go teach macrobiotics. So I called this prison. Turned out I wasn't paying attention to what I was calling. It was a maximum security prison. And so they said, oh yeah, you can come and teach. So they gave me a time, and I was teaching macrobiotics to 30 prisoners, and they were serving life sentences. So I'm like, oh, they're not even going to get out, these guys. But anyway, so I taught them, all the basics. We did cooking. We talked about cooking. I couldn't teach cooking, but it was all lecture style, and diagnosis, and some shiatsu and this kind of stuff. And so your father was coming to Toronto, came to Toronto to teach, and they called me from the prison, and they said, please come this Monday. Are you coming? And I go, well, I'm supposed to come, but I'm not sure. No, you have to come. You have to come. So your dad came with me. So we went to the prison, and I think your dad gave the lecture that night, and they had prepared all this food. I don't know. They weren't allowed to cook in their. It wasn't that kind. It wasn't the type of prison where you could do your own cooking because it was maximum security. And I don't know what they did. They took apart kettles. Anyways, they made barley stew. They made brown rice, and they must have made some other things, but that's what I remember. And I was kind of nervous about tasting the food. So I thought, okay, they went to all this trouble. So had some brown rice, and it was very, very sweet. I go, this is like, what did you do to the brown rice? And they go, oh yeah, we cooked it with Coca-Cola. So yeah, so your father and I ate. I think I can't remember. I think we ate the barley stew and we ate the Coca-Cola brown rice, and yeah. So I taught there for quite a while, and then of course we were going to organize a cooking class, and I can't remember how we were going to do that, but anyways, there was some talk of doing a cooking class, and when that got out, then I was like not welcome. Like they would confiscate my books when I came in. They gave me a really hard time going through security, and it became kind of clear to me that so ridiculous that the food, like there's big unions, there's food unions, in these institutions, and they must have got wind that somebody was coming in to teach some cooking or cause trouble. So that never materialized, but it was pretty funny. And anyway, and they were all very, they were a captive audience up in the hill. I also taught at a methadone clinic for a while, and I taught everywhere. I taught classes in a rural community outside of Toronto, and my friend had she'd done a video recording, and she put it in. Everybody was so happy at first, so she put the recording into the local video store. We used to have video stores in those days, and people were taking it out and listening to whatever. There was a lot of allergies, lots of children with asthma and things like that because of the dairy consumption. So anyway, then it turned out they banned my video from the video store because they thought that I was promoting taking away the livelihood of the local community, which was a farming community. So I'm like, oh my God, like, so macrobiotics was so simple, and yet it's so subversive, creating problems everywhere I went. So anyways, yeah.
That's really interesting. I never heard that story, but what an absurd notion to cook brown rice with Coca-Cola. I mean, I don't know what they were thinking, but that's funny.
Oh, maybe it was too young for them. I don't know. That is funny. Like, it's so weird. I don't know. Maybe they thought it was bland. I don't remember, but it's pretty weird. Yeah. So now apparently in our prisons you can get everything. Prisoner goes in, you can have vegan food. You're not forced to eat whatever's on the menu that day. Yeah. They take, you can have kosher food, like no pork, whatever special religious dietary restrictions you may have, but also vegan. Yeah. So there's no excuse.
That's amazing. And I always wondered if I, for some reason, got arrested, how would I survive? Like if I went to prison, how would I survive in prison?
Well, I'm sure that there would be like a grain. There'd be like salad and white rice and.
Well, now I know. I wouldn't have to, be forced to eat meat or whatever.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, it must be the same in the U.S.
I don't have any plans on going to prison.
I was just going to say, yeah. What are you planning? Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I know, in the near future. So, what else do I want to talk about? Yeah. So when I listened to João Borges, and he was talking about George Osawa getting the tropical ulcers on purpose, and recovering and trying to but trying to make a point. And I think he said something like, if George Osawa was here, he would be, I'm not sure what he would be doing, contracting COVID on purpose or something. But it's something, he really, I thought about that at the very beginning, because just before COVID happened, it was the 25th of February, I remember the date, because my daughter called and said asked if I could babysit for the afternoon, because my grandsons had the stomach flu the night before. And I said, oh yeah, sure. So I went over, and they were they had been a little sick overnight, and they were basically lying on the couch, and neither of them wanted to eat anything. They were just tired, sleeping. And I sat with them, and then I went home. And then 24 hours later, I got the stomach flu. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't think that I would catch the stomach flu from my grandchildren, that macrobiotic immunity kind of idea too. And, but I, whatever, it wasn't life-threatening. I was a little bit sick, and then the next day I lay on the couch for a while. But I thought, oh my God, I can actually catch things. Like it was kind of this, maybe I can catch this virus, right? Because then the virus happened like 2 weeks later. So this was already in my mind. So anyways, the shutdown came, the virus came to Canada, and I started thinking the same thing. Like, what would George Osawa do? Like, what would Micho do? What would we be like? When HIV happened, when AIDS happened, Micho went out into the community, right? And it was pretty scary. Nobody knew how contagious it was and so on, And I mean, where would you go here? Would go to a nursing home and go to a nursing home and give 80-year-old people umeboshi plums? I don't know what you would do, right? But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if I'm a coward,
Huh. I wouldn't think that.
I don't know what you would do other than keep teaching, macrobiotics.
Yeah, I mean, macrobiotics certainly doesn't make us immune to disease. We know that, and if there was any arrogance about that, it's certainly.
Oh yeah, well, I think it's been knocked out of us on many examples of It
should be. I mean, certainly.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of that, like especially with the early days regarding things like smoking cigarettes.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Eating out all the time, and use of oil, all that stuff needs to be looked at and addressed. But I think what's unique and what's great about macrobiotics is that even if you do get sick, we have a sort of framework to understand it, and we can start asking questions. Well, why did this happen? What are the things that caused it? What are my imbalances? Am I too lean or too young, or both, or just too restrictive, too wide,
Yeah.
And that's really the benefit of macrobiotics. And I like to sort of summarize it in a very vague sense as food awareness. Being really conscious of food, not just food, but like I said, it starts with food, and it's about being conscious. It's about becoming more conscious of what's really important: consciousness, growth of consciousness, which is the development of our soul, in a sense, you could say, because our soul our soul is developed by consciousness. So that's sort of a summary of how I see the whole.
No, for sure. And I mean, if I don't really know anybody personally, like in my knock on wood and everything, but that has come down with COVID, for example. But presumably, if somebody came down with it, you would treat the symptoms the way you would treat like the person and the condition. Like, I don't know, because we talked in the beginning of the virus. I gave a lecture on what to do, to prevent. To strengthen your immune system, and if you did come down with symptoms, but it's like, I don't know, would macrobiotic person have the same symptoms as somebody else? I don't know. So you would treat the condition as it arises, right? Like whether you give them ume shokuzu or whether you give them warmed up green apple will depend so much on the person's condition, constitution, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. So you can't even, it's really hard to do a template of how to treat COVID. You can't, right? Just like how to treat cancer or how to recover from MS. Like everybody's situation is completely unique, and that's the beauty of macrobiotics, because you can apply it to what take the person with their condition, their constitution, their environment, and but yeah, it's not like I haven't had like my door hasn't been broken down with people asking me for help recently,
No,
yeah.
You
know what I'm saying? Like there's so many people that have diabetes, like even like acquaintances, friends, things like that, like that have allergies, that have all kinds of things. And I mean, I've kind of stopped proselytizing, but they know what I do. They're not interested. They'd rather take their medication. I find that really confusing and disappointing, right? And watching watching people suffer, well, preventing suffering is one of the main reasons that I embrace macrobiotics. I mean, I saw immediately the changes in my children and my changes in myself, after changing my diet. And I sort of thought everybody else would want to know how to do that so they wouldn't have to, become sick with chronic illnesses but so I don't know. That's the $1 million question.
I think they will. I think it's a timing thing, and we're sort of in this sort of weird time where it's accepted to be a sick person. Like, that's acceptable. Like, if you have some sort of illness and you have to go to the doctor and you have to take your pills and you get expensive surgeries, that's normal. And people, if you have that, they sort of feel like, well, I'm just like everyone else. I'm sick like everyone else is sick. But I think that it has to do with the timing that we're in, and that we're sort of in the future. It's not going to be like that. People are going to be like, well, that's crazy. If I know how to heal myself, right? I'm going to heal myself.
Yeah.
And that's what we think.
Yeah.
But that's what's going to be normalized in the future. Right now, we just live in a very sick society, essentially.
I mean, there is a lot of alternative stuff going on. There's naturopaths at every corner. There's chiropractors, naturopaths, acupuncturists. There's all of that. And I just wonder how much of this impression that we have is fueled by media or by pharmaceutical companies or advertising, or I don't know. But people are taking tons of medication. And I noticed it after I stopped because my husband passed away in '96. And after that, I didn't teach for a while. And when I came back to doing consultations, it was like I have to remember now to ask people specifically. But before, you have the form and they would tell you if they were on medication or not. But now I have to ask specifically, are you on any mood alters? Are you on, I am. Oh, what about cholesterol medication? Oh yeah, I do take one. It's like they don't even tell you, they don't consider them medication. It's just like what they do every day. So high blood pressure, statins, and some diabetic, or they're usually diabetic or pre-diabetic. That's just normal. And they're told by their doctors that they have to take them for the rest of their life. So there isn't even any of this like, well, let's see how you're doing and then maybe reduce or this or that. It's just like, and then some people get into trouble. They change their diet and all of a sudden they're passing out. Oh yeah, because I forgot I was on, I was on diabetes medication, or blood pressure medication. They forgot. And so anyway, whatever, they make adjustments. But I find that remarkable in just like maybe 20 years, the explosion of medications and how people are medicated. And they're afraid to go off because they're told, no, you have to take this high blood pressure medication for the rest of your life, or the blood thinners, or the.
Well, the pharmaceutical industry is huge. It's bigger than the meat and dairy industry, and they have huge influence. I mean, it's one of the biggest lobbies in the United States, in the Western world, really. The modern civilized world. So they have a huge influence, and that's exactly what they want. They control so many doctors. They pay them to recommend these things, to keep pushing them, and so they have a hold on all these people who are taking these pills. They just they control them.
Well, I guess but in New York State, they passed legislation just recently making vaccinations mandatory because of the little measles outbreak that they had and this and that. So my grandchildren live in Brooklyn. So they wanted to, I mean, this isn't funny, it's horrifying. So in November, my daughter asks me if I can write a letter because she wants to get an exemption, philosophical exemption, and explain how she was raised macrobiotic. And so we wrote this really great letter. We covered all the religious bases. And anyway, did a nice letter, but before she presented it, but before anything happened, they passed the mandatory legislation. So my 4-year-old tiny little perfect granddaughter is expected to have like 72 injections plus every year a flu shot. A 4-year-old starting at 4 or 3 or whatever age they start their preschool, and my daughter got kicked. Her pediatrician kicked her out, but because she didn't want to vaccinate. And so I don't know. Hopefully there's going to be court challenges for this. But it's very frightening. And then during this is just a pet topic of mine. And then during maybe you saw these statistics during COVID, sudden infant death syndrome dropped by 30%. because children weren't being vaccinated because, doctors' offices were closed and things like that. So if that in itself is not enough to send out a scary signal to doctors that are administering these injections, I don't know. I don't understand it.
It's yeah. I mean, when you start paying attention to these things, it's infuriating, number one. But hopefully, we can change that fury into motivation and inspiration and do something. But it definitely needs changing. Like, it's not okay. We can't just have the pharmaceutical companies making laws that mandate medical tyranny on us. And I mean, like, I want to fight someone.
Yeah.
I'd rather do something positive like this. Transform that energy.
Yeah.
But initially, it's like, oh, that makes me mad. Like stay away from me and my family and my kids and my friends.
Yeah.
Like, we don't want your medicine, your vaccines. It's poison.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just wondering. I'm not very hopeful that there's going to be a COVID vaccine, but that's another thing coming down the line. Excuse me. I have to open a door for the dog.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, my daughter-in-law works for the city, and she's working from home, and she says, I don't think we're going to go back to work until there's a vaccine. I'm like, what? Like, that's crazy. Like, and she goes, well, maybe I should. I'm like, oh my God. So yeah, that's craziness. And then the trials. Did you watch Robert Kennedy Jr. and Dershowitz and their debate?
No, but I have followed Robert Kennedy's posts.
Yeah, so I didn't know this, or maybe I knew it, but I didn't pay attention. But he was talking about the tests. They're testing the vaccine, so they have like their test. They have the two groups, and one group they give them the COVID vaccine, and the other control group, instead of giving them nothing or a placebo, they're giving them meningitis vaccines. So meningitis apparently has the worst side effects of all the vaccines, like all the other vaccines. So the usual side effects from a headache to death. And so then the results of the studies, how are they going to come out? Oh, the COVID vaccine is just as safe as the meningitis vaccine. Like, is that, like, how does that even get past? I'm not even a doctor or a scientist or anything, but how does that even get past the logic?
Corrupt.
And they won't do, don't get me started. They won't do trials on children. They won't compare children who've had vaccines to children who haven't had vaccines. They haven't done that. No one's done that study. I mean, if it's been done, it hasn't been like in a major study. But we know what the differences are. We know, right? My kids weren't vaccinated, and I know how sick they got or didn't get. And my friends, my macrobiotic friends, none of the, it's anecdotal, of course, but right?
Yeah, like, well, we have like this thing, the rise of fake news. Well, there's this whole other rise that hasn't received as much attention, but it's fake science. And I'll give you an example. Michael Greger pointed out in his nutritionfacts.org that the Egg Board did a study where they compared the effects of egg cholesterol compared to a sausage McMuffin sandwich, and said, eggs show no worse effects on these already unhealthy people who had already high cholesterol compared to a sausage McMuffin. Okay. I mean, are you kidding me? That's ridiculous. Therefore, eggs are safe to eat. Bullshit.
I know.
Like, you're lying.
I know. I know. And you're absolutely right. Like, I used to be very militant. I remember when GMOs came in, I remember being shocked. I didn't even know this was happening. So GMOs come in, and there was this whole, I went around getting petitions to label GMOs. Like, this was in the 90s. And like, everybody that I spoke to, like really smart people, nobody knew what I was talking about, and we're shocked. Everybody was shocked because they didn't know this was happening. So we got our big petition and everything. And then I had a friend who was in government at the time. So I actually approached ministers, like the Minister of Health, whatever. And they pretended they didn't know what I was talking about. I even got booted out of a hearing of a political thing where there was a presentation on GMO. So this guy comes on and goes, oh yeah, here are GMOs, are going to GMO tomatoes and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, I stood up and I go, wait a minute, like when did you do this? Who did you ask? Whose permission did you ask, right? Those kind of questions. And then I was told to sit down, and then I was told that I was anti-farming, and all, like, this went on. And then anyways, there was a booming voice from the back of the room, and it was a senator, and he goes, she's absolutely right. And he went through everybody who was sitting up there, and he goes, who pays you? What, you know, and anyway, it didn't make any difference. So I was more militant. Then I stopped because it was impossible. Like, you can't, I mean, I don't want to fight my whole life, and I had to make a living at the time, and I had other things to do. It eats up all of your time. You can't, so I chose to just do what I'm doing, teaching, and you know, because the other way, you just get exhausted. It's impossible. Anyway.
Same here. I made a lot of enemies speaking up, but you know, like you do what you can and you learn. And I think my new strategy is better. It's an evolution, and it's more focused on the positivity. You know, spreading awareness through macrobiotics, doing these interviews, writing my blogs, making other videos, and I have my website. So.
I just want to tell you, you had this big influence. A friend of mine, a student of mine, has been trying to get this friend of hers to change his diet. I don't really know what he's got some serious issues, but I'm not sure what they are. And she sent him your video on the 10 worst foods. And you know what got him? Do you know what got him? The man boobs. So he changed his diet. He changed his diet like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he emailed her and he said, look, my man boobs are going down. So there you go. And the fact that you were so like straightforward and so like, yeah, speak your truth, right? And who cares? Like I try to be diplomatic, you know, because I'm a lawyer, but sometimes it's just like, you know, you're just a big fat greedy pig. You know, I try not to go there, but sometimes it just needs to be said. And it's, so you had an impact. There you go.
Nice. Building up my karmic credit, I like to call it.
Your karmic credit. Yeah, no, I think you're doing a fantastic job.
Good. Alice,
I should actually tell you what, I do have a program. Maybe I can mention it.
Yeah, please.
Anybody's lasted this long in the video, in the interview. I'm doing this 1 month, 30-day startup program. I just started it in April. That's another thing I started during COVID. So people can register. There's a manual with recipes and explanations about macrobiotics. So it's a good startup for people who are new or people who want to refresh their practice. And then there's 1 month included with the cost, which is minimal. It's $100 for the month. There's a month-long support, like online or by telephone from me. And as well, we have a weekly meetup on Saturdays, you know, by online, where you can become a member of the weekly meetup for life, like once you join. So, and that program is going really well. I'm finding that people need lots of support, right? They also need community where they can exchange experiences. And so anyways, I provide that. And I just wanted to mention that if anybody was interested.
Yeah. I will give me a link. Send me a link, and I'll put it in under the video.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, we're approaching my the time limit that I like to keep it under an hour. So I would just say I have my website, themacrobioticdiet.com. I offer macrobiotic counseling and also astrology counseling. I'm hosting a website, a webinar for my mother, Judy Floor, who's going to be doing a talk on August 15th at 10 a.m. It's called What is Family Unity? And I encourage everyone to check that out. It's $15 suggested donation, but just pay whatever you want. My mother has has tons of experience and taught way back when. She hasn't taught in a while, but she's trying to get back into it. So, check out my website, check out all my videos. I will provide a link for Alice's, what is it, a program?
It's a 30-day startup program. I'll give you the link to my website. I'll send you a link.
And yeah, so Alice, give us some inspiring final words for the macrobiotic community to end on.
Well, I mean, macrobiotics is supposed to, our life is supposed to be about having fun, right? That's the purpose of life. And I think that, like, when you have when you know some principles and you can control your health to some degree, like, having fun becomes much more accessible. And I think that that's really the purpose of macrobiotics. It's not to torture people or to make them, deprive them or make them feel like they're bad if they can't, you know, if they have a brownie or something like that. The whole point of it is to become free and to experience life and to be able to enjoy nature and your family, and hopefully with minimal suffering, you know, as we go through, as we trudge through life, right? So I don't know how inspiring that is, but really, the purpose of macrobiotics is freedom, you know? Yeah.
So I agree. Inspiring words for me, and I'm sure for many others. So let's all take that to heart. And thank you so much, Alice.
Thank you, Joe.
For talking with me, and I enjoyed this. I thought it was great. So.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been fun. All right, guys, that's it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Joe. Bye.